So you may hear things that sound like this is the magic bullet. This is the absolute best thing you could possibly do to build your business online. Maybe it's Instagram, maybe it's TikTok, who knows? But I believe that you need to, one, make sure that whatever you're doing is in alignment with what you sense God calling you to do. And two, that you don't have to buy into the lie that there's going to be a one magic bullet that's going to just explode your business.
Welcome to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, where we hope to inspire you to embrace your God-given gifts, skills, and passions in order to lead with confidence. We want you to remember that you are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, and you are fully loved by Him.
You have been designed on purpose by God with unique gifts and passions in order to love and lead those around you. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, a pastor's wife, business owner, mom, and writer.
And I'm Esther's co-host, Holly Kane. I'm a wife, mom, and business owner. I also write at hollykane.org, where I focus on my passion for women's ministry.
Together, we chat about important issues that Christian women leaders face. In addition, we interview other women just like you who lead in various roles, from church to community to business. Through this podcast, we offer you encouragement, tools, and resources to help you on your leadership journey. We are so glad you're here with us. Hey friend, it's Esther Littlefield. I am excited to be with you here today. I have recently returned from the Spark Christian Podcast Conference, and that was just an amazing experience. And if you're on my email list, you got to hear a little bit about that, but I'm not going to share about that today. I am here to kick off a new series for the month of March. We are going to be focusing on the topic of business. So we're going to be hearing from a couple other business owners who are sharing their stories of how they've built their businesses and been able to incorporate their faith in the process. I'm super excited for you to hear those conversations. But today I am going to share a solo episode with you. And specifically, I want to talk to you about the foundations for growing your business or your audience online. So this is not going to be an episode specific to growing a brick and mortar business. That's really not something I have experience with. But if you want to have an online presence of any kind, this is for you. And if you are somebody who wants to be a speaker, an author, a blogger, this is also for you. And maybe you don't feel like you are actually a business owner, but I want you to stick around even if you don't think you're a business owner, but maybe you have a dream of having a blog or a podcast, or maybe you want to write something someday. This will still apply to you. All right. I want to give you a little bit of a backstory in case you don't already know. So, if you have been listening to this podcast since the beginning, you might be familiar with my business story. If not, you can go back and listen to episode 38 where Holly and I talked, and she kind of interviewed me about my business journey. But I'm not going to recap all of that, but I do want to just give you a little bit of a background for this episode, as well as a bit of an update from when we first recorded that episode. All right. And then after that, we're going to jump into the 3 essentials to building a foundation in order to grow your business or your audience online. All right, so I'm going to go back in time a little bit to when my entrepreneurial journey began. It was when I was first invited to a scrapbooking party after college. After I had gotten married, I was invited to this party. And if you've ever been invited to one of these parties, you know what I'm talking about. There was somebody there selling the products, and I was in love with the idea. I was in love with the products. And within probably a week or two, I had decided not to just buy the products, but to actually sign up to sell them because I wanted to pay for this new hobby that I had. So I actually was in the direct sales or network marketing industry for over 13 years between that company and one other company. Direct sales taught me a lot about how to build a business, how to sell, and the importance of long-term relationships. Later down the road, I became obsessed with podcasts when I realized that I really wanted to start focusing on my writing again, and I decided that I was going to make something of my severely neglected blog. So started consuming everything I could about online marketing, about social media, about building a business online. And my primary way of learning about those things was via podcasts. I knew it was possible to make money online and to build a business online, but I really hadn't met anyone who was doing that very successfully. So this is where I started learning all the things I could. I started following certain entrepreneurs online, certain people. And after about a year and a half, I had been building up my blog, developing my email list. I was actually selling a program that I had made online, but I really wasn't earning the type of income that I needed to justify and contribute to our family household. So that's when I pivoted to becoming a service provider. So I realized that I had just spent a year and a half learning all kinds of skills that other people needed in their businesses. I also had just a natural knack and ability to pick up on tech and things like that quickly. And so through the relationships that I had built during that blogging season, I found clients quickly and my business took off. So over time, I went from doing all kinds of different services for people to narrowing in on focusing on podcasting. Again, it kind of went back to my love for podcasts as well as my kind of initial desire to start learning about podcasting for myself. And I started to focus on helping clients who needed help with their podcasts. So I had a client who had a podcast. I learned from that experience and I started diving into learning for myself as well. And so that was when I then started this podcast. In July of 2018, we started the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast. And I started testing out the strategies and the systems that I had developed through working with my own clients and working, on myself. So after our podcast reached over 100,000 downloads in less than a year and a half, I knew that I wanted to be able to share what I've learned with more than just my one-on-one clients. So at the beginning of this year, I decided to make a shift. Again, if you're on my email list or if you follow me on social media, you may have seen me share about this. I've talked about it a little bit on the podcast, but I realized that there's people out there, some of you perhaps who maybe are a business maybe are a podcaster and you want to grow your audience. You want to reach more people, but you may not be ready to hire someone to help you do that. You may not be ready to hire a team to help you manage your podcast. And so what I wanted to do is take what I've learned and shift to serving Christian business owners and content creators who want to grow their audiences online. And I know there's a lot of business coaches. There's a lot of noise in this online space. There are so many people teaching different strategies and things to do that. So I didn't want to just add to the noise, but I've had some of you come to me and just kind of share some of the struggles you're having or some of the challenges you're having. And I have wanted to be able to find a way to share some of that advice and wisdom that I've developed over the years with you in a different way than what I had been able to prior. So I shifted my business again to focusing in on Christian business owners, but also shifted to doing more teaching, consulting, coaching kind of things. So you may be seeing more of that coming down the pike. And I do want you to know that this podcast, the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, is still going to be the same podcast you've been listening to. But from the beginning, we have shared that this podcast is for women leading in ministry or business. And so my goal is to help you as a Christian woman, whether you're leading in either one of those areas or in another area of your life. And so occasionally we will have episodes geared towards business. So even if you're in the ministry world or the corporate space, I believe what we share on these episodes will be valuable. And so I wanted to just kind of give you that backstory of where I've come over the past several years so that you would have an understanding of why I'm sharing this information and that I'm not just someone who just has come up with this out of, the past 6 months of doing something. So what I'm going to share with you today are the 3 essentials that I think you need to have as a foundation to grow your business online or to grow an audience. Because again, I think there is so much coming at us. There's so many different opinions and recommendations, and you've got to do this and you've got to do that. And I want to tell you, first of all, my philosophy is that there is no one size fits all solution for you as a business owner. So you may hear things that sound like this is the absolute best thing you could possibly do to build your business online. Maybe it's Instagram, maybe it's TikTok, who knows? But I believe that you need to, one, make sure that whatever you're doing is in alignment with what you sense God calling you to do. And two, that you don't have to buy into the lie that there's going to be a one magic bullet that's going to just explode your business. Okay. So that's what I want you to understand to begin with. And what I want you to think about too is the fact that when you're looking at people online, whether it's business coaches, gurus, experts out there, a lot of times they have a very polished presence. They have a lot of amazing products. They have webinars, they have books, they have speaking engagements. And then maybe you look at the influencer space, even in the Christian world, and you see authors, speakers, podcasters, bloggers who have thousands and sometimes millions of followers. Lots of published books, big speaking engagements. And it can be really easy to start thinking and comparing yourself to those people and thinking, I will never get there. I'm not famous. I'm never going to reach 1 million people or 1,000 people or whatever it is. Or maybe you start thinking, okay, what did they do? What is the magic bullet? What's the key to getting to where they are? Or you might be thinking, man, how did they get there so quickly? They just kind of came out of nowhere and now they're super famous. And while there may be a few people out there who have kind of an overnight success story, or they hit some kind of jackpot when it comes to opportunities and timing, for the most part, every single person that you see who has built any kind of following or platform or influence, leadership, if we want to put it in those words, they have done it over a period of several years, and they've put in a lot of time and energy that you didn't see. Okay. And yes, I said years because I don't sugarcoat things. I really hate the false promises that I see some people out there sharing when it comes to building a platform or growing an influence or anything like that. So there are no overnight successes. Each and every person that you see online, building a business, growing any kind of audience or platform, it has taken time and they've probably made a lot of mistakes. They have done a lot of different things. The only difference is that they have not given up. Okay. And you may have heard this before. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but this is something I want to make sure that you know. If you're trying to build something or you have a dream in your heart, you have something that you sense God has called you to do, and you feel frustrated because it's not working or you're kind of stuck, I don't want you to throw in the towel when you see something not happening as quickly as you wanted it to. All right. So I'm going to share a quick example just to paint a picture of what I mean. And I want to do this just so you get a better idea of what this idea of building a foundation for your success means. Okay. So several years ago, my husband and I built a home. We had purchased land several years prior to that, and we were finally ready to dive into building our home. And I vividly remember the months leading up to moving into the house. I was really, really excited to get into the house. And the fact is, there was a lot of work that had to be done before we could move in. So first, the groundwork had to be done there. The land that we had purchased was covered in trees and bushes and things. So that land had to be cleared and the ground had to be dug up so that the foundation for our house could be put in. And we would visit the property frequently. We would come, we would look at the progress, we would see things moving along. And when the foundation started going in, we started to get a little bit of a picture of what the house was going to look like, but it wasn't very pretty, and it was just this ugly gray cement in the ground, and it was really hard to kind of imagine what the end result was going to be. After the foundation was put in, then the frame started going up, and it started to get a little bit easier to see what the house was going to look like, but again, it still didn't look very nice, and it was definitely not ready to be lived in. As things moved forward and we progressed, there was approximately 7,000 decisions to be made in the process. And you know what this is like if you've ever built a home. We had to decide what kind of flooring we wanted, what color paint we wanted on the walls, what kind of kitchen cabinets we wanted, doorknobs, light fixtures, you name it, we had to decide. It was all these little details. And sometimes it was actually quite overwhelming, but it was also a lot of fun. And finally, it got to the point where we were able to see the home and the siding was put on, the roof was put on, and things were complete. Now, we've been in our home for about 5 years now. And while there are still a few things we would change if we were to do it over again, for the most part, we love the home and it is a solid foundation. The structure is firm. We can live here safely. We can have people over. We can host events. It's serving its purpose. And building a business is very similar to this. A lot of business owners want to jump right into choosing the fun stuff, picking out the paint colors and picking out the bathroom fixtures before they have built the foundation. And they want the beautiful end result before doing that hard work of building the foundation and getting the elements that they need to succeed for the long term. So I've seen people that just kind of throw something up really quickly. They basically throw up rickety walls on top of sand or dirt, and they kind of slap something together because they're so anxious to get to that end result. But then a year later, they haven't gotten anywhere. They haven't reached their goals. And it's because they didn't spend the time building a foundation of what they needed to have to succeed. Okay, so when you focus on the end results and the beautiful picture of where you want to be 5 years from now, you forget how simple a foundation really is. And honestly, there's a lot less decisions to be made in the foundation stage of your business. But if you skip that stage, you're going to set yourself up for a much harder road. So I know you're ready for me to dive into what these elements actually are. And I'm sorry for such a long kind of intro and lead up to this, but I really wanted to kind of share these, my background and this little example to give you something to think about as we move forward. So in this episode, I'm really not going to be getting a lot into business strategy. I'm going to kind of share some practical things that I think you need, these 3 essentials for the business foundation. I will share a few strategies, and this is going to be a really high-level overview of these essentials. It's not going to be a full-on training of all of these things because it's just not possible in one podcast episode to do that. So one more caveat I want to mention before I dive into the 3 things is that I am really talking specifically today about people who want to grow an audience and a business online, and that's not everyone. So if you are a service-based business and you're someone who's providing one-on-one services, you may not need to do all the things that I'm talking about. Now, maybe you still will want to, but this is really geared towards someone who maybe has a digital product, coaching, group programs, books, or you desire to be a speaker, an author, or have some sort of online presence to share a message, to share something that's really important to you, and you want that message to reach a lot of people. All right, that is what I'm talking about today. Okay, so the first thing I want you to have in terms of your foundation for building a business online is a website. Okay, this seems kind of obvious, but a website is going to be the main hub of everything that you do in your online world. You want to have one place to send people where they can get all the things related to what you're doing. And a website is something that you own. You have control over the website. You own it. No one can take it away from you. Okay? I don't really think you should build a business or try to build an audience online without a website. Now, I think you could get away with it for a little while. And a lot of people do start off without having a website, and I think it's doable. In fact, I know a lot of people who just start with a Facebook page, and that's okay. But I do think that you should have a website within the first several months of your business so that you get that kind of hub place where everybody is going. A website helps people to take you seriously and to see you as a legitimate business. And if you're solely operating off of social media, it's going to be hard for people to see you as a legit business owner over the long term. And remember that social media is rented space. It's kind of like going and getting a rented lot somewhere and building your house there. Now, at any moment, that owner of the property could come and decide that the property is no longer for rent, or that the rules have changed about the rental space and certain parts of your home are not allowed. And so you lose, you lose out because you lose your business, you lose your home, whatever it is. Okay, so you never want to rely on someone else's space to build your business. So what does your website need to have? Again, I'm giving you a quick overview and I'm going to give you a few resources. But again, this is not like an in-depth website training. So first, I would recommend checking out StoryBrand. Donald Miller's company has great resources about building a business and marketing your business online. And he has a resource about the 5 things your website should include. So I'm going to link that in the show notes. You can go over there and grab that because that has some great tips. And I've learned a lot from the StoryBrand book and his podcast and all of that about building and creating my website. Okay, but here's just a few tips of what I've learned. You want your website to be simple and clear. Don't try to be super clever on your website. When someone lands on your website, they should be able to quickly and easily understand who your products and services are for and what you do. And they should also be able to see what should they do next. What's the next step? Another thing about your website is that it should be about the person landing on the site. It shouldn't be about you. And I hate to break it to you, but so many websites that I visit, it's the first thing I read is something about the person, the owner of the website. And while, yes, eventually people will want to get to know you, initially it has to be about the person coming to your site. Your website needs to speak to the person you are serving. So when you land on my website, estherlittlefield.com, the first thing you read is, it's time to embrace your God-given gifts, skills, and passions in order to lead with confidence. And then when you scroll down a little bit, you read, if you are a multi-passionate Christian woman who leads in your church, business, home, or community, you're in the right place. Okay? I wanted to make it abundantly clear that my website is for you. If that's you, you know right away. If it's not you, you can leave and you don't have to waste your time searching my site to figure out if it's for you. Okay? The third tip I have for you on your website is to use consistent colors and fonts. This is essentially creating a basic brand. I don't think you have to start off creating a huge, big brand and spending thousands of dollars on branding. Although some people might disagree with me, but I think when you're first starting, you can keep it simple. But what I don't want you to do is get super fancy on your website and spend all this time having 5 different fonts and 7 different colors and all kinds of patterns and images and backgrounds. It gets really hard to read and view. And so you really want to keep your website simple and easy to process. So to create basic branding, and again, I'm not a branding expert, and I'm just giving you a snippet of advice here, is just to choose 2 to 3 main colors and 2 to 3 fonts max that you use on your site, and make sure it's legible. Don't use really fancy or script fonts for more than a few words. Okay, to quote one of my favorite podcasters, Amy Porterfield, start simple, get fancy later. I love that quote, and it's a reminder that I keep for myself because I always want to make things better. And sometimes we just need to start simple and get fancy later. All right, so there's a few pointers on getting started on a website, and I don't want to get into all the details of that today, but I want to just mention my recommendations, and at some point down the road, maybe I will have other resources that go more in depth on this. But I recommend WordPress for a website. And the basics of what you need are, you need a domain name, you need website hosting, and then you just choose a theme within WordPress to create your website. Okay. And there's lots of free templates. There are so many free resources to do this that you don't have to spend a lot of money. You will have to spend $10 to $15 a year on your domain name, and you will have to spend a monthly cost on hosting if you want a self-hosted website, which is what I recommend. But typically that's paid once a year, and the cost is typically $5 to $10 a month. So it's not a huge investment, but it's a little bit. Now you can do a free website. There are free website builders. You can do WordPress.com, which will allow you to do a free website, but there's less functionality and less ability to make it exactly what you want. But that's how I started. I started with a free website and eventually I shifted to, doing a self-hosted website. So I'm going to give you in the show notes for this episode links to my recommendations. So I recommend SiteGround for hosting. On my website, I use Divi as a theme. So I'll link that up. And there's other resources that you could use. There's other website builders. I know Squarespace is really popular. So there's lots of ways to do it. I don't want you to get hung up on choosing the exact right thing because you could spend 3 months trying to make a decision about what to do for your website. And I think you could just start simple and then get fancy later, like I mentioned before. I'm pausing here to let you know that this episode is sponsored by my business, Morningstar Media Services. At Morningstar, it's my goal to help Christian business owners like you grow an audience and make an impact without compromising your faith or your values. And I have a free gift for you if you already have a podcast or if you're thinking about starting a podcast. I want to give you my free podcast workflow checklist. This is the process I use each and every week to keep my podcast on track and to work with my clients as well. This is what allows us to go through each week without missing a single step and keep everything running smoothly. It also helps us to save a lot of time on the back end of the podcast process. To get the free checklist, text the word podcast to 917-905-8801, and I will send that checklist right out to you. So I want you to know that you don't have to follow this workflow exactly. It has a lot of steps on it, and you may not want to do all the steps if you're podcasting, but it's a great starting point and a reference to just understand the phases of a podcast and what has to be done behind the scenes. And it's also great if you're thinking about starting a podcast because it'll give you a picture of how much work there is on the back end of a podcast. So I'm going to let you swipe my process for free. Again, you can text the word podcast to 917-905-8801, and I will send it right over to you. All right, let's jump back into the elements of a strong foundation for growing your business or your audience online. The second thing I think you need to have is an email list. So I recently shared with a group of women who had participated in a class about growing their podcasts that I wanted them all to be growing their email list over any other numbers. Because on social media, again, you don't own those names and you don't have access to those people at any time. It's completely up to the social media platform how many people see your posts each time you post. And so with an email list, it's similar to the website. You own that email list. And so you have more control over how often you reach out to your email list, how many people are opening your emails. Now, you can't really control whether or not they open it, but you can work and do different things to help people have more interest in opening your emails to make sure you're providing value and giving them things they're going to want to read. And so it's really important to have an email list and to start growing it now. If you don't have one already, start growing it now. And if you do have one, continue focusing on that. It's more important than growing social media. All right. So if you're brand new to growing this business online, or even if you're not brand new, make sure you're not solely relying on social media. I don't want you to be fooled by the big numbers that you might see on Facebook or on Instagram or other platforms. Even if those numbers are big, those people may or may not actually be potential buyers or people that are interested in truly hearing from the person who owns that account. And so, again, the algorithm can change, accounts can get shut down. I've seen people lose their Facebook page. I've seen people lose Facebook groups. I've seen Instagram accounts get shut down. When that happens, you don't have a lot that you can do. Now, sometimes those get recovered, but I want you to make sure, even if you're using social media, that you also are growing an email list. And I'll just tell you my own experience. I'm really glad that I have done this because my email list is a lot bigger than my social media followings. And I'm okay with that. Someone might look at my social media and not be super impressed, but that doesn't really matter to me. But the fact is, I know I can reach out to my email list whenever I have something to share, whenever I have an offer, and they're going to be people that have already said yes to hearing from me. They can unsubscribe if they want to, and they do, but it certainly is a better way in the long run of reaching my audience than purely social media. All right. So again, I'm not giving you an in-depth training on how to get started with building an email list. I'm just giving you a few pointers. And then at some point, there may be additional resources, or if you want one-on-one help, I do offer consulting calls. So you could always reach out and we could set up a time to go over this in depth with you individually if you need hands-on help, because I love providing hands-on help. So the basics are to choose an email service provider. Personally, I use ConvertKit and I love it. And they now have a free option. So I'm going to put the link in the show notes for you. It is an affiliate link. That means if you sign up and you end up buying a paid plan at some point, then I receive credit for that. And that does help me cover the cost of running the podcast and all the things that go on behind the scenes. So I always appreciate when you use the links that I provide in the show notes. But there's other options. There's other free options. There's MailerLite. There's MailChimp. There's lots of great things out there. But I want you to know that all of these programs have a learning curve. So I don't want you to get discouraged if you start trying to build an email list and if it doesn't happen overnight or if it doesn't come super easy, that's okay. I don't want you to get discouraged. There are so many free resources out there on YouTube. There are blog posts. There's resources on help centers right on these different programs. There are things and ways you can learn. And I don't want you to give up on the idea just if it doesn't feel easy right away. Okay. So the second thing is, after you have an email provider, you want to have a free lead magnet or something that you can give to people. You heard me earlier mention the podcast workflow checklist. That's something that I have created. I put time and energy into making that. And I've gotten a lot of really positive feedback from people who've gotten onto my email list because of that. And they've really enjoyed that resource. So it doesn't have to be something super long. I actually don't recommend ebooks because that takes a while to consume. You want something that is easy for someone to consume, something that's going to give them a quick win that they can download and use right away. Okay. So again, this is something I have spent a ton of time learning about. I'm giving you the high level tips. The third thing after you have a lead magnet is you want to have a consistent email plan. So basically you want to send emails to your list on a regular basis. If you start getting people on your email list and you don't email them for a month or 2 months or 3 months, when you finally do send them an email, they probably will have forgotten why they were on your list to begin with, and they might even mark you as spam. So you don't want that to happen. So you want to have this email list. You want to create a schedule. If it has to be once a month, do once a month. I recommend once a week or every other week, but do something so that people can stay in touch with you, and make sure to keep it about them. Your emails can include personal stories and examples, but you always want it to be something that they are going to enjoy reading and it's going to give them value in their life. All right. We've talked about website. We've talked about email lists. The third foundational piece that you need in your business is content. Now, this is something that you put out on a regular basis. What is content? If this is a new thing for you, let me just explain. Content is basically anything that you put out as an idea, a thought into the world. Okay. It can be written. It can be spoken, like you're listening to right now, a podcast. It can be a video. It could be on YouTube or Facebook Live or Instagram Live. Really, it doesn't matter the form. It's just content is anytime you put ideas and thoughts out into the world. All right. And so if you're building a business or an audience online, you do need to have some form of content that people can read, listen to, watch, so that they understand who you are, what you're teaching, what you're sharing with the world. And when you are getting started, I want you to keep this simple and doable. Some people will tell you have to do a weekly blog post or a weekly podcast or a weekly Facebook Live or YouTube. And while that's a good idea, and I do that now with this podcast, I didn't always do that. And so I just want you to know that again, this isn't a one size fits all situation, but I do think you need some form of content. And if you can't commit to doing a blog post or a podcast or a video series or something like that, I think you can get away with, in the beginning, just posting regularly on social media. And I don't want you to build your business on social media, but if you have the other elements in place, your content could live on social media. Okay? So I don't want you to overcomplicate it. I just want you to think, what type of message do I want to share, and how can I share it regularly? This is where I see a lot of people getting hung up because they are trying to be in all the places. And I want to just encourage you not to try and be in all the places, especially in the beginning. Now, if you have a big team and you're making a regular income from whatever you're doing, then okay, go ahead and pay people to schedule your posts or to repurpose things and put them in all the places. But in the beginning, really just focus on one or two social platforms, be consistent, and then show up regularly. And over time, you can expand to other places. So that's probably where I made the biggest mistake earlier on. And at some point, I might share more about that. But at this point, I focus primarily on my Facebook page and my Facebook group. That is where I spend time creating content, coming up with things that I think those of you who follow me in those places or participate in those places are going to like reading, are going to enjoy, are going to respond, are going to create, opportunities for communication about certain topics. So those are the places I focus. All right. I have spent a lot of time and energy learning about social media and implementing social media, both for myself and for clients. So it's something that I really have kind of a lot of sometimes useless knowledge about. But I will tell you that one of the best investments I have made is in the Grow Your Audience course from Rachel Miller. And Rachel Miller is an expert on Facebook primarily, but she helps with a lot of things. But that course is something that I have found great value in. I'd highly recommend it. That course is closed right now, but I'm going to give you a link to a resource that she has that you can get for free. It's 23 conversation starters for Facebook pages and groups. And this is a great place to start with creating content. If you're stuck on what to say and you feel like people aren't responding and people aren't getting what you're posting on Facebook or on any of your social platforms, I think you could use this for a lot of different places. Then get this free resource and start using it, because that, again, is a starting point. And then consider, when her course is open, jumping in, because I definitely recommend it. All right. One last thing I want to say about content is to make sure you save your content somewhere, especially if you decide to post it on social media instead of creating a blog or a podcast or video channel. Please, please, please make sure you copy and paste your post, especially the longer ones, into a safe place like Google Docs or Evernote. There's always a risk with social media that something will disappear. You'll type up this big long post and then you'll go and hit post, and then for some reason it's not there. And sometimes there's glitches. Again, sometimes pages can be taken down. So I want you to make sure, if you spend time creating content, that you have it backed up. And I actually recommend that. Even if you're posting on your blog, I don't recommend writing your blog post in your blog platform. I think you should write it in Google Docs or Evernote and then copy it over, because then you'll have it backed up just in case something happens. And I've seen it happen, and it's really devastating when you lose work that you've done. So let's recap the 3 essentials that you need for a strong foundation for building your business or your audience online. You need a website, you need an email list, and you need some kind of content. Okay, those are the 3 things. Let's keep it simple and let's just get started. So maybe you're saying to me, Esther, I have an idea for something I want to do online, but I am not really sure what that would be. Or maybe you just don't have clarity around what you could offer. Maybe you don't really understand fully what your gifts are or what God is calling you to do. And so if that's you, I want to tell you something. A big part about doing something like this comes down to what you believe to be true about God and about yourself. And it comes down to having confidence in who God is and who He's made you to be. Because when you start putting out your ideas online, you open yourself up to all kinds of feedback, good and bad. And if you are not confident in who God is and in who He's calling you to be and what He's calling you to do, then when that feedback is negative, it could really destroy you. So I want you to start, before you even dive into figuring out maybe what you want to do in terms of a project or anything like that, I want to make sure that you're believing the truth. And so I have a free Renew Your Mind guide. It's full of scriptures and replacement thoughts for all of those self-doubts and maybe lies that you've been believing that easily come into our minds, either from other people or from ourselves, that trip us up and stop us from moving forward on what God might be asking us to do. So I want you to get that free guide. You can go to the show notes for this episode, estherlittlefield.com/episode 89. And just scroll to the bottom of the show notes. You'll see the link right there. You can pop in your name and email. Again, that's for someone, ideally, if you're struggling with self-doubt, if you're struggling with believing that you have a purpose, gifts, calling, anything like that, this is going to help you replace those thoughts with truth. Okay? Thank you so much for listening today. Thank you for being part of this community. I want to share one quick fun thing that happened at the Spark Christian Podcast Conference. You may have seen this on social media, but we actually won 2 awards for the podcast. There were some awards that happened at the conference. One of them was the best interview podcast, and the other one was the best outstanding podcast host co-hosted. So that was really, really fun and exciting to be part of that. So if you've been listening, if you've been one of our listeners for any length of time, or if you've shared the podcast, if you've written a review, any of those things, I just want to say thank you, because it's not lost on me that we wouldn't be doing what we're doing without you, without those of you who are here and listening week after week and supporting us. And so it's super, super encouraging to have you here with us. And also, it was really fun to get those awards because I wasn't expecting it. So I want to end and let you know, come on back next week. You're going to hear from Valerie Warner, and you'll hear her business journey of how she has grown a business with purpose and prayer. Our conversation was so rich. I can't wait for you to hear it. Make sure you're subscribed so you can come back and listen next week. Thanks for joining us on the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. We look forward to chatting with you next week. And don't forget, your leadership matters. And it's time for you to embrace your gifts and lead with confidence.